Migratory birds are not unique to any particular regions. Some migratory birds come from China, Russia, Korea, or even as far as Alaska in the United States. Through migratory birds, we are effectively connected to ecosystems and people in faraway lands. Hello, my name is Yong Ding Li. I'm a conservationist and ecologist with BirdLife International, a conservation organization. I work on the conservation of many of these threatened species of migratory birds. When I was young, I lived in both Malaysia and Singapore, and I had the good opportunity to be bird watching on the train journey up and down Malaysia and Singapore. So I think that experience kind of made me realize that birds are not just crows and miners, they're way more than meets the eye out there. Conservation is a fun job, but it's not necessarily for everyone. A big part of conservation that we do involves setting up protected areas and working with local people, government officials, to ensure that these protected areas are well managed. By getting them to be part of the conservation process, it can help to create that very important shared sense of ownership of the wetlands or the forest. One of the biggest challenges and opportunities for migratory birds is that these migratory birds, they have such large distributions. For example, the wimbrel that we see here in Sungei Buloh, they move across multiple countries. If I want to successfully protect species like the wimbrel or any of the other shorebirds, we need to make sure that people are working together to implement conservation activities and measures that are synchronized across different parts of its distribution. When we see that these migratory birds are in decline, this is the first sign that there are imbalances or other general ecological problems with the wetlands. Wildlife and migratory birds in particular, they offer an early warning to us on the state and of the health of our environment. Migratory birds are well associated with Sungei Buloh. This is one of the easiest places to see many different species of migratory waterbirds. And they travel here through what we call the East Asian Oscillation Flyway. As winter approaches the Northern Hemisphere, food resources become scarcer and scarcer. So many migratory birds, essentially, they make these journeys to avoid these harsh conditions, but also to access the food resources that they can get here in the tropics. Many migratory birds are not very colorful, so they are not easy to find, they are not easy to see or even identify easily. One of the most easily seen migratory birds here in Sungei Buloh is the common red shank. It is called the common red shank because it's got very distinctive reddish legs. You could also find the Pacific golden plover here in Sungei Buloh. They are mostly brown with speckling on their plumage. These birds, they are very special because they come from as far north as the Arctic tundra. Another migratory bird that we can find here is the common kingfisher, which is amongst the smallest of the kingfishers that you can see in Singapore. They are not that easy to find, but you can sometimes see them hunting along the creeks and the streams here in Sungei Buloh. My favorite migratory bird is the Arctic Warbler. It's a very small bird. It's a humble bird, a brown bird. It's not more than 11 cm long and weighs less than 10 grams. So it fits nicely into the palm of one's hand. But it's got a great story to tell. It is a bird that breeds in the taiga forests of Russia. So for the Arctic Warbler to come here to Singapore, it would have to travel a journey of more than 7,000 kilometers. When we're out in the field in Singapore looking at migratory birds, there's a few things we could do to make our experiences more enjoyable. One of the most important things for us to consider is to dress as comfortably as possible because it gets a bit hot and humid in our wetlands and forests. Try to stick to trails. That's for your safety, and also you avoid disturbing our birds. They are in their natural habitat. I will encourage you to refrain from using playbacks of a bird's call or song because it disturbs them in their natural environment. Keep silent. Often you need to have the silence to listen out for the calls of migratory birds. Growing up in a working class family, the library was effectively my eye to the world. As a primary school student, I used to plow around the libraries digging for books on birds and wildlife. Some of the libraries I remember visiting was the Jurong Regional Library. I also spent a lot of time at the Central Library in City Hall and more recently here in the Choa Chu Kang Library. After 20 years of looking at all these books, I am still very much a book lover. I buy a lot of books and I still visit libraries everywhere I go. Given that most of us now live in an urban landscape, I believe it's really important for us to forge a new relationship with nature. Living in the city means that we have less and less contact with biodiversity. We see less wildlife, and so we often tend to lose touch with nature, making us not appreciate for all the services nature can provide us. As a conservationist, I think it's very important for us to remember that nature is still under threat, and we must continue to take action to protect nature. I hope that birdwatching can become a powerful force for nature conservation by getting us to pay more attention to the wildlife around us, which hopefully can build that interest to want to protect them. If you're interested to learn more about nature, you can join the Nature Society of Singapore. The Nature Society organizes many activities where people introduce you to nature and also even migratory birds. Or you could even volunteer at the Nature Society to support conservation activities. You could also find out more about migratory birds, birds in general, or biodiversity at the library. I've been fortunate to work on this book called The Field Guide to the Birds of Singapore, which introduces the reader to more than 400 species of birds and also to the different kinds of environments that birds can be found in here in Singapore. One of the species that we have tried to highlight here in this book is the black buzzard. It's a familiar but striking bird of prey with a long crest. They migrate through Singapore in good numbers each year, and during the months of October, you can see flocks of them as they fly through the hills of Singapore.